Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, kicking off their spring game this Saturday. And Dill, this is one of those spring games that the fellas are very excited for. We've talked extensively about this program on the recruiting trail, in the transfer portal, and now really our first chance to see what this LSU team is going to look like in 2024. Fired up to get into it. We got a couple bold predictions. We got a couple storylines that the fellas are following. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the LSU fans, whether we're talking this program in the transfer portal, talking about spring practice, the recruiting trail. The amount of support the LSU fans have shown the boys truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear some of your players that you're really keeping an eye on heading into this spring game. And Dill, I'm going to kick this one off to you. And I'm going to start it a little bit differently. And we're going to go with the question, fast forward to Saturday afternoon, when we're going live and breaking down what we just saw for LSU. Who's that guy that we're going to be talking about that maybe you didn't think we'd be talking about sitting here right now?
Yeah, and honestly, that's kind of hard because everybody knows how good these LSU players are. We know how good they are up front. We know how good their skill positions are. And frankly, we think we know how good Garrett Nussmeier is. What I kind of think is going to happen, I think Chris Hilton's going to grab the bull by the horns and just take this wide receiver room over. You kind of look at what he has. I mean, in terms of replacing some of what they lost last year with those two guys' ability to not only work downfield. I mean, we know both could do it at a really high level, especially Brian Thomas, but then be able to also just play normal wide receiver as well. I think Chris Hilton Jr., I think he'll be the best deep threat on this team. You look at how he tracks the ball down the field vertically in that Wisconsin game and some of the plays he made. I think this is going to be his wide receiver room. I think we're going to see he's the guy. That's what I think. I get why Kyron Lacey was the third guy last year, just because kind of how he complemented what the other two did in terms of just being a really solid route runner in some of that short and intermediate part of the game. But I think I look at Chris Hilton Jr. I mean, he's going to be the guy.
What's really cool about this LSU wide receiver room is you could tell me CJ Daniels is the wide receiver one, Kyron Lacey is the wide receiver one, Chris Hilton Jr. is the wide receiver one. I believe you for all three of those guys. I think certainly Chris Hilton Jr., you read the spring practice notes, he's being a guy during spring practice. I'm excited to see him. Dill, I'm going to go with another name, kind of a cop-out in terms of we know who this guy is, but I feel like college football needs a little reminder of him. And that's tight end Mason Taylor, who was extremely impressive as a true freshman, was very good in 2023, just kind of got buried behind guys like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jaden Daniels. Dill, you lose guys like Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. Yes, you have a lot of wide receivers who we think can step up and kind of replace that production. I think you see LSU go back to the old trusty tight end position in Mason Taylor, a guy that, again, just didn't get the opportunities that he got as a true freshman. But you are looking at one of the best tight ends in the country in my mind. And I think on the spring game, kind of first opportunity, post Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, I think Mason Taylor kind of reminds college football that he's one of those dudes at the tight end position. Now, where I want to go with this next is talk a little bit more about the wide receiver room, and it's not necessarily questions that I have. I know this LSU wide receiver room is going to be good. In fact, I took a lot of heat for taking USC's wide receiver room over LSU and hand up. Say that was probably, I could see why LSU fans were giving it to me in the comment section. This LSU wide receiver room has the potential to be great. Part of the reason why I love this LSU wide receiver room is you look across the room and you have so many guys that can do so many different things. It's such a well-rounded wide receiver room. You have your deep threats, right? CJ Daniels, Chris Hilton Jr. You have your bona fide route runner in Kyron Lacey. My eyeballs in the wide receiver room are going to be on Aaron Anderson. This is a guy that I was extremely excited for going into last year, just didn't get the opportunity because of how loaded that wide receiver room is. You look at what Joe Sloan wants to do on the offensive side of the football, that's get it out in space to his playmakers. Aaron Anderson, not many better in the country at operating with the football in his hands. I think you're going to see Aaron Anderson get involved in a lot of different ways. He's a guy that I think is going to be sneaky, really productive for this LSU wide receiver room in 2024.
And I think, frankly, a big part of that is I think this offense is going to look a little different, frankly. And at the end of the week, when you're replacing a guy like Jaden Daniels, who did so much. I mean, he was on the ground. He's obviously throwing really effectively. That offense was very built around what he was doing. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier, again, we know he can throw. We've seen a lot from that. We know he's got that part of his game. Obviously not going to replace what Jaden Daniels did with his legs. And that's kind of like what Brian Kelly said. I mean, the offense will look different. I think they're going to use more of that like passing attack with a run extension, if you will, or using that run or passing attack to be an extension of the run game is probably a better way to put it. But using more quick screens, using more tunnels, some of that stuff that, again, I think when you look at who they have, Aaron Anderson's probably your guy for that type play, even running some jet sweeps, just doing a little bit more to, again, allow Garrett Nussmeier to thrive a little bit more without having to put so much on him in terms of being both that guy in the run game and the pass game.
Yeah, 100%. And I think piggybacking off that, when you look at the running back room, I'm surprised neither of us took this guy as the breakout guy of the spring game, Caleb Jackson, the running back spot. I mean, Caleb Jackson, I think, truly has the potential to be one of the best running backs in the entire country. From what you saw, the flashes of that Wisconsin game, extremely high on him. You look at the offensive line, zero question marks. I guess I'm excited to see DJ Chester slot in at that center spot. Dill, I think DJ Chester might be an upgrade at the center spot. You're talking about an NFL kind of guy filling in. We've said it multiple times. This is, in my mind, one of the best, if not the best offensive line in the country. Not many question marks, largely on the offense at all. Now, Dill, there's a different story on the defensive side of the football. I'm going to give you the T-box here. One thing that you're looking for on the defensive side of the football for them LSU Tigers.
I mean, it's obviously this defensive tackle position. And frankly, you just want to see guys like those depth pieces, like those Sean Washingtons, those Jalen Thomas, those guys, or even Dominic McKinley you could get to. I mean, those guys who you know are going to be more the reserve role, but are going to need to step up because you look at the top, they don't have those hammers like they had last year with Mason Smith and Mekhi Wingo. And not that those two I thought played their greatest season in the world, but they don't have those NFL guys at the top. I think you're kind of looking like you're going to need to be a little bit more deep, cycle guys in and out, and probably play all those bodies just to keep them fresh and keep them rolling at the highest level. Again, I thought they put too much on their top two last year. It felt like Mason Smith and Wingo are on the field too much. I don't think you have that luxury this year because you don't have that ultra top end talent. So at the end of the day, I mean, you're going to get to see these guys go up against really good offensive linemen, and we'll know quickly if they have it, if they're tough enough to. I don't think they don't need to be the greatest unit in the world, but they need to be tough. They can't be a liability. That's at the end of the day.
Yeah, two things I'll know right off the bat. One, I wish Dominic McKinley was on campus because I really want to get a feel for, is he going to be a guy that starts and can be a reliable guy year one? Secondly, Bear Alexander needs to already have been contacted by Brian Kelly and this LSU staff. We talked about LSU prioritizing the inside of that defensive line in the transfer portal. I wasn't going to predict someone of the caliber that Bear Alexander is to hit the portal. I think LSU, this is a massive opportunity to really answer one of the biggest question marks we have for this program. On the defensive line, yeah, I think you're kind of right. You just want to see some depth stand up, and you look at all the top defenses from the last couple of years, not only star talent on the defensive line, it's really deep defensive lines, right? That was kind of the MO for Michigan last year. You want to see that depth kind of figure itself out. And I think you'll get a good feel because, again, this LSU offensive line is going to be dominant. How does the defensive line hold up against that LSU offensive line? Dill, number two for me, how is Harold Perkins getting utilized? Again, going back to that off-ball linebacker spot. Blake Baker coming in. We've talked about this extensively. Blake Baker, what separates him in my mind, not only player development is very good for him, but I think he's an expert at using some of these guys in the best ways possible. You go back to Harold Perkins in 2023, completely mismanaged. I think Brian Kelly would tell you that. I think a lot of LSU fans would tell you that. Harold Perkins is going to primarily play that off-ball spot, but he's a guy that's a chess piece, and you want to see him move all around the field and really let him have his fingerprints all over this LSU defense. How Harold Perkins is getting utilized is probably the number one thing I'm looking for this LSU Tigers defense. When you have so many question marks about this LSU defense, you have one of the best players on defense in the country. Man, let him go to work.
And that's always interesting what they do in the spring game. Like, I wouldn't necessarily totally read into it if you don't think they're being aggressive enough or doing what you want to see. because everybody, it feels like defenses just play vanilla. I mean, you look at what Clemson did on defense last week. Like, yeah, they were throwing the kitchen sink at them a little bit. But I think in a lot of cases, you see defenses kind of just play it a little more straight, especially in those spring games, keep guys healthy, all those things you want to see. But I think you're right. I mean, you'd kind of like to see some of what Blake Baker is going to be bringing. Do I think we'll see all of it? Definitely not. But I think you do want to see, some of that aggression.
I'll say this. I get why a lot of teams want to just go vanilla in the spring game, get out healthy. If I'm Brian Kelly, I'm Blake Baker, I'm turning it up on this LSU. Like, this is a massive question mark for this program. Go play how you're going to play in the fall. At least in my mind, you want to see what this LSU defense can do in a real life setting. And I guess maybe that can happen during the spring scrimmages that aren't televised. But I want to see Blake Baker really turn it up with this LSU defense. Now, the last question mark we have is in the back end. Some new faces, some young talent. Dill, this is where I'll ask you the question. Breakout player that we're talking about Saturday afternoon for the LSU Tigers, because I know you're going to go with the secondary. Who you got?
I mean, it's Ashton Stamps for me. I think he's the guy I look to be like, all right, we need someone to step it up in that cornerback room. We need to have that guy. And again, I get that they had some injuries for sure with Johnson, Zy Alexander. I thought Zy Alexander before his injury was playing pretty solid football for the most part. But I think to me, it's Stamps. I mean, you just look at the talent, you look at the length, the smoothness, those things you kind of look for in the new modern day cornerback. He kind of has it all. He's the guy I'm kind of looking forward to take a little bit of that. All right, who's going to be the guy in our secondary? It's got to be him. I think he's got the potential to do it. And frankly, I'll have a good opportunity to go to battle with some really good players. So again, we'll get to kind of see what he's maybe developing in.
I'm going to go with two players here. I'm going to go one, Javion Toviano, in the sense that I am interested to see how they use him, going back to Blake Baker being very good in terms of how he uses talent. I see Javion Toviano as a guy that could be elite nickel. And I wouldn't mind seeing him get some of those reps. You have some question marks about the long speed at the boundary cornerback spot. Big time build, really quick twitch. I think he fits in that nickel spot. I'm interested to see how they use him. And then I'll go Jordan Gilbert, coming from Texas A&M, a guy that, I mean, I thought this was a massive gap. Played really good football for Texas A&M in 2022. An experienced guy in the back end is what LSU sorely missed last year. Very interested to see the impact that he has on this LSU secondary. Though we could go on and on about the question marks that we have for this LSU defense. We'll talk about it Saturday afternoon when it wraps up. Really excited about this spring game. A lot of things I'm looking forward to. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section in terms of some of the question marks that you might want to see answered for this LSU program. Let it go in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.